G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. You've had a great weekend and the Sunday blues, well, they don't have a hold of you too bad. So today, as always, we do have a lot to go over. We're going to look at strikes. We're going to look at the Russian Volunteer Corps, and I want to talk about that as far as an intelligence operation and how that could be used, how we haven't seen it used, and some information from a friend of mine as it is a celebration of the Intelligence Corps in Ukraine today, and we need to talk about that more at length. We need to talk about Nord Stream, what Germany is saying, what Poland is saying, what Ukraine is saying as that continues to evolve, but I think continues to be ignored a fair bit as well. We need to look at the maps in all areas, but we'll have a massive zoom in on that Pokrovsk, Seladove front. We need to talk about the defensive works in there and how Ukraine need to hold Seladove, and we're going to talk about a guy on Twitter talking specifically about the defensive works and how he sees the defense of this city here as well. So we'll talk at length about all of this and all the changes as we go and anything strategically important. But I was thinking again about that $10 million towards some information campaigns, maybe funding some media in the US. And I was thinking that this is small fish. I know $10 million might be a lot to like you and I. 10 million is a lot of money. But if you think about it, a caliber missile is $6.5 million a pop. And if you do believe that the pen is mightier than the sword, I completely believe that the major nuclear states around the world, being America, Russia, China, India, all these big states have multi-billion-dollar information campaigns going on. That is my belief, because I think, well, the damage information campaigns can do at, and even say maybe that 10 million, is significantly more than the weapons on the other side of that. And by that pen is mightier than the sword, I wouldn't be surprised if there's multi-billion-dollar operations going on all around the world, funded by some agencies from friendly or adversary states as we know it. So let's have a look at some strikes off the bat. I know this might keep you guys a bit more engaged. So up in the north, of course, what we've spoken a lot about is where Ukraine has had its northern offensive, the Sime River, and this gap in here of logistical supply. Now that a lot of the bridges have been taken down and temporary bridges have been put in place, now many were saying there was going to be like a clean sweep through here or a withdrawal, and that hasn't really happened. We haven't really seen any movement from this Thankyou or on this Nagost front for now some time, being Ukrainian movement here. So we have some footage of these pontoon bridges still being hit with, I believe, HIMARS as well. So we see some footage of multiple cluster warheads here hitting and destroying a bridge. And then this vehicle here crossing as some water is across then the pontoon here. Now, this bloke was bloody incredibly lucky. It would have been like a bit of a Hollywood scene if you looked in your rear view mirror. So this is the vehicle out here, and then this one is struck in the water. And you can see then the damage that's been caused here isn't super clear. It looks like some of these vehicles are still able to cross these bridges after they have been struck, as it is so shallow here. But again, any kink in logistics does have follow-on effects. Now, we have seen a large ammunition depot dump in Voronezh Oblast then come up in flames as well. Of course, this is a Russian then area. Now, you can hear a lot of secondary explosions here. There's a lot of claims that this was long-range missiles. What I will say is the long-range missiles are not going to be in this area only 150 k's back. From Ukraine, they're going to be near to those bases where the long-range strategic bombers are. There may be a lot of missiles here, a lot of fabs here, and ammo depot here. So what is exactly here? Well, there's a lot of people with claims about it. Not that many will actually know, but we do know that this area here, this Soldatsko, is basically all up in flames from NASA firms data, and there's a hell of a lot of ammo has been lost there by the Russian forces due to a Ukrainian drone. Now, I see so many people talking about, this is an F-14, this is the second best aircraft looking ever. I reckon the best looking is still a MiG-29 with a Tomahawk missile. And many people are saying this is what Ukraine needs. Ukraine needs Tomahawk missiles to strike deep within Russia, hit the bombers, hit oil facilities, and this and that. Now, I don't disagree with this. That said, we don't know how Tomahawks would actually go against modern air defense also. But like I've said in this, Ukraine is struggling to get ATACMS approved. US isn't looking like they're budging, or Storm Shadow Scalp, that Tomahawk is a very far-fetched then beyond these weapons that have a 300 to 500 kilometer range as well. And we do know that Zelensky is saying that there are problems even for the shortage of missiles and cooperation even within occupied territories at the moment, including in Crimea. So there's a lot of problems there. So it's not that I disagree with the Tomahawk, but again, it seems like a very far-fetched from just trying to get what's already there, what's already being used, actually in play as well. And like I'll always say, I do think from what we have seen of past success, long-range drones in swarms are probably one of the ways to go, if they, especially if they can be domestically produced. But on this topic of talking about Tomahawks, would this be completely game-changing? Probably, again, not. Russia's greatest strength and greatest weakness is its bloody size. Of course, its size has protected it from a lot of attacks historically as well, but if we have a look here, Tomahawk has about 2,000 Ks of range. Let's go absolute max at 2,500. You're still not that far in when we consider the bloody size that Russia actually is, but the greatest weakness is here that then Russia has to have manning points at a lot of locations on a absolutely massive border as well. So you've got bloody troops everywhere and they can't be consolidated to where you may want them exactly for the fighting at the time. And this is why we've seen a lot of build up in Finland and in Japan as well of Western forces to try and draw forces that Russia may be able to deploy to Ukraine to garrisons in those areas in case there was a threatening of attack, to try and thin out the forces available for Ukraine as well. So I want to talk about these Iranian missiles, and this came out from the Wall Street Journal. US tells allies Iran has sent ballistic missiles to Russia. Iran has sent short-range ballistic missiles to Russia, following stern Western warnings not to provide those arms to Moscow. I don't really think Iran gives a shit about what the West say, because if you see it, the absolute atrocities that happen in areas like Tehran of people being hung by just bloody morality police too, again, I don't think they care. And the problem is, once you have a certain level of sanctions, eventually you run out of actually be able to have influence there. US official confirmed the missiles have finally been delivered, saying we have been warning over the deepening security partnerships between Russia and Iran since the outset of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and alarmed by these reports. That said, the security partnership between Russia and Iran and the concern for Western states has been for more than a decade of the growing influence and partnership here, and of course, the nuclear proliferation that could occur as well. We're prepared to deliver significant consequences. Any transfer of Iranian ballistic missiles to Russia would represent a dramatic escalation in Iran's support for Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. And we know this partnership is going both ways. We know there's a lot of Russian support that flows into the IRGC to act as proxy wars within the Middle East as well. Who are the biggest beneficiaries of strikes against ships from the Houthi rebels down in Yemen? Well, look at where other bits and pieces of either the North Sea route or then China's Belt and Road Initiative too, giving other ways rather than through the Suez Canal too. I don't believe we'll ever really see a major state war, but we will see many, many wars pop up in the next decade, including a hell of a lot of proxies. And this may give US a good excuse too, through Israel too, to strike a lot of facilities in Iran that are supporting then the elements that Israel is fighting too, and give a buffer for Russia to have more ballistic missiles and buffer their own production of those missiles too. This is something that I hate when people don't take into account. So many accounts, so many very bright people, and Russia will run out of weapon at this point. They'll run out of weapon at this point. They're only looking at domestic production. What they're failing to do is Russia has allies. They're called, well, a lot of Five Eyes countries will call this the axis of upheaval. China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and a few other states sitting in here. Now, what people forget to take into account is it's not just Russia's industrial capacity. You need to take into account that they still have a lot of money to purchase weapons as well. And could we see this purchase or a swap of maybe technology for dumb weapons into North Korea or into Iran, or with China, the physical purchase of weapon systems too, and that blows straight out of the water immediately when Russia will run out of X weapon system, because of there's still allies there, still the ability to purchase weapons and partnerships, strategic and tactical as well, that will continue. And the industrial capacity of states of which may be authoritarian or which we don't look into, we can't have a Western superiority complex and just say, oh, that's shit. North Korea is a great example of this. North Korea is a dictatorship, horrible, bloody place of energy, a terrible thing. I'd never not say that. But that does not then mean that we can disregard their industrial capacity. The amount of shells that North Korea has delivered to Russia absolutely gave the buffer that Russia needed to get its industrial capacity of shells back up to speed. And suddenly, since Bakhmut till now, we haven't seen that shell starvation over the last 12 months that Russia was having massive problems with at the time. So just because you look down upon their politics or this or that in these states doesn't mean you can disregard then industrial capacities or the ability to create maybe analogues too. From people I've spoken to in Israel in some of the services there, they do say Iran through the IRGC is really, really good at creating analogues of weapons, so copies of weapon systems to pop up, and authoritarian states can traditionally make systems for significantly cheaper than capitalist liberal democracies as well. So don't let your political views seep into then infecting how you see industrial capacity in war also. Does that then make sense? And if this didn't make sense, if it didn't make sense to have a more overarching influence on industry, martial law wouldn't exist in wartime. The ability to then, yep, you're not making cars, you're making shells anymore. And these states are the absolute epitome of being able to do this for incredibly cheap as well. North Korea basically has tens of millions of slaves to create these systems. Don't take that into account. Yes, the high-end systems struggle, but quantity is an absolute quality of its own. Now, let's have a look. I've deleted a folder at then Sledovy and Pokrovsk frontline too. So here we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 2022, the purple since 2014, the green and blue areas of which Ukraine has liberated back or has then pushed into Russia in the case of Kursk. And then we have, of course, the red check is area that Russia has made over the past 24 hours. And what you can see is movement out of Krasnoyarivka, as well as the capture of Nevelsky and an increased amount of control of grey zone here, as well as there are a lot of reports of withdrawals out of this, what people are saying is the Nevelsky pocket, but no real change around Sledovy here. One thing we need to say is there are many reports that Ukraine is deploying mass reserves for counterattacks in the Pokrovsk front. And we're going to look at why that may be incredibly important as well. So let's have a look over a couple of maps, as we do have a lot to look at. So let's just talk about Krasnoyarivka first off, as we do have a couple of maps that then show this. So the first Syriac map of the day shows expanding control out to the west and the north of Krasnoyarivka as well, taking control of absolutely the majority. And then the second update we get shows this further westerly push, but it does show significantly more to the north than the deep state map shows. Again, it shows of what the grey zone is in here. Remember, as far as the last then bitumized paved roads is out this one through Zeleny as well, and through Zeleny Persha and Rui as well. So this pocket here may close up. We're going to go over why it may be very important for Ukraine to have a reasonable withdrawal out of here. Surak, he says, we're days or hours away from the total capture of Krasnoyarivka. Ukrainian army has practically withdrawn from the suburbs of the city and quite possibly from almost all the area between Vovcha River and this reservoir, with the exemption of Zeleny and Zereny. The front West Donetsk city is turning into the front Kudakove. So that this is closing up significantly through in here, and can it move from where they did have positions on Donetsk on the outskirts here in 14, that it's going to really then start pushing back. And this is what this map shows today. These are the only map updates from Deep State here. So let's just move up just a little bit now. No changes shown on this map here today, but let's have a look at Ukraine's front here. So this is one of the areas of which we believe Russia had failed assaults into Ukrainsk coming from the west. So they're trying to sort of go down and maybe hit it from the north, potentially sort of skirting around some of those defensive positions in here. They took full control over Lysivkia in here and entered Ukrainsk from the east and south. So just showing that this has branched up just a little bit more. And see this road to the west of Memrik. This road is saying completely under control by the Russian forces, by Suryak in here as well. So saying there is some movement there. Remember, live UA map shows very differently in here. Other maps show very, very differently again. Now, where we need to talk about is Seledove right up in here and how important this may be. Now, what we do need to look at is the difference in what these maps show, because this will have a significant effect on how we actually are able to analyze how dire the situation may be here in defensive works or not. So we see these then spoils here as well, and Suryak shows that the Russian forces are well inside of Seledove, well outside of even the grey zone here. And of course this map does not show this, and this has a huge effect when we look at what defensive works may or may not be under control. Of course, we saw 93 mech, one of Ukraine's more experienced units, come into here to have then a counter-attack push on here too, but does that then alleviate Russia's pressure in some other areas where they could push and have potential success too? So again, this is showing that Russia has taken more ground inside after those counter attacks. And what I want to look at is from this gentleman here, and we'll read through this and have a look at where these maps and where the defensive works are sitting. That Seledove is a part of the Kursk defensive line, rendering the settlement vital to retain under control. It's important to underline by Novahorivka's fall, which threatens to severely worsen the operational situation in the field west of the town. Now, Novahorivka here came under control with very, very little resistance. And we see this by the photographs in here of the town. Yes, of course, it had been shelled, but not like we see other areas completely destroyed by shelling. So there was a quick move through. The Ukrainians understand this very well and have not been idle when it came to preparing the city for the Russians there. Trenches have been dug all around the city, so let's analyze them. Now, this is Seledove here and the trench systems. That said, I have been highly critical of these trench positions from areas of which we know, this is Seledove here, from the 2014 line, from Avdiivka, that a lot of these positions have fallen through here, and the preparation to fall back to more advantageous lines fall again and again. Now, is this pulling back methodically to wear down the Russians? Yes, there is an area of that, but it seems like there has been just a bit of a chaotic fall through Novahorivka, Mykolaiivka, and Orlivka as well. And this is Seledove. Now, what we need to point out is behind Pokrovsk, Seledove, the amount of defensive works really, really then starts thinning out, which is of major concern. Now, the best trenches were occupied by Russia when Ukraine was in the chaotic retreat phase. These trenches were also located behind a fully finished anti-tank ditch, adding to their defensive potential. So the best lines in here have actually been taken by Russia, then behind anti-tank ditches as well. As of now, only a few isolated trench systems remain under Ukrainian control near Seledove, some of which are 9 years old. And this is what we've spoken about down in this part, is there are positions falling in here that have been held for 9 or 10 years since that initial invasion. Let's give a closer look at the urban aspect of the area composed by an urban agglomeration formed by Seledove, Mykolaiivka, and other smaller Dasha villages, providing some sort of buffer for Seledove. Now, this is where it gets confusing in here, because the difference between where these maps show. So if we believe where Suryak says the front line is, a lot of these areas are already under control, where this is taking into assumption that these lines are still holding. The Ukrainians used it to their advantage to slow the Russian advancement pace in urban environments, using the time gained to organize somewhat efficient defense. So by slowing the Russians down through these urban zones and other defensive areas, they're able to then build up their defense further back as well. Let's dive further into Solidova. The town is divided by many parts by streams and rivers, and a very big high-rise district seen in the red here. It's almost 7 times bigger than Zalesny. This area here is still in Ukrainian hands. So this part in here, which is shown by Suryak as not in Ukrainian hands, this is said to still be in Ukrainian hands, and this takes a huge difference in our analysis of the situation in here. South of here is an industrial area, also said to be occupied by Russia by Suryak, while west of the town is a railway line, which may help to stop possible daring Russian outflanking attempts. So if they do try and outflank here, and the ability to take areas and push in can be somewhat compromised by a lot of open ground, but also cover from train lines in here by positions for Ukraine also. Now, as of now, Ukrainian defense in the high rises and Terraton, so the industrial area itself on the dashes, is nearby, that are now fully staffed and are holding strong. So it said they're fully staffed now. We did see 93 mechanized redeploy into this area and have regained some territory by the maps, and we do believe are specifically in here to fully staff this and hold these areas as well. Now, I think that as of now, Zolodova's biggest threats come from the flanks. The situation will as such only worsen if the Russians break through the rail line. This is in Orange Railway. This may happen with an attack through the fields west of Novohorivka or the capture of Ukrainsk. So if Russia can get to Ukrainsk or west of Novohorivka and break into some of these areas, then the flanks become exposed for Solidova. And as we've spoken behind Solidova, it really starts thinning out on defenses. We have to remember that if the Ukrainians retreat in an organized manner from Novelsky Pocket, the pocket we've spoken about, the front will be significantly shortened. This may help containing further Russian advances on the Ukrainsk axis. And it has to be an organized retreat. So this is the hard thing with shortening and lengthening front lines, is of course it more condenses your forces. So if Ukraine do pull out of here, they're going to have more forces condensed to work in here, but then so is Russia. And with this flank then, say this closes up something like this, that the Russia's ability to bring more troops into the fight and also bring those fighter aircraft closer to drop weapon systems as well, like the FABs, is going to also increase. So lengthening and shortening the front line is very difficult when you have a numerically larger force and numerically inferior force, who it's going to work in favor of at the time. If holding Solidova the holding of Solidova is extremely important to help Ukraine gain invaluable time to continue upgrade trenches in the rear, to regain organization and start planning next steps. Significant digging efforts continue indeed. So that many efforts in here, they need to hold this to try and build up those works that then are behind this. In conclusion, Solidova is a town that is very suitable for defensive purposes and can offer a fan of opportunities in favor of Ukraine. I'm confident that if no mistakes are made from the higher ups, the town will prove extremely tough nut to crack for Russia. So it could be a lot of losses and very difficult. And here we saw the resistance in Novohorivka. That wasn't that great. Solidova has proven to be far more resistance in here, and is the Ukrainian command seeing that this area is far more defensible, more ability to actually defend this area, and therefore putting in more resources as well as the redeployment of those forces. As if we look on then, this map behind here really starts thinning out in the defensive works and the ability to get in behind the defensive works that run all the way to Zap. I think we'll see a mass amount of deployment of force to try and hold this line, as it doesn't want to get run away on here, as we are seeing some movement and other pieces move in here also. Now, the other bit I want to look at is the Russian Volunteer Corps. So the Russian Volunteer Corps, on then their Telegram today, released this video. Today, the fighters of the RVC congratulate all military intelligence professionals operating both on the front line and deep in enemy rear. According to good tradition, we congratulate not just in words but in deeds. Our fighters and agents are from all corners of Russia and occupied territories at closed events on the seashore and quiet villages of noisy metropolis. The RVC is always nearby and ready for active action. So we see here this video that's released with it. You can post it on Telegram if you'd want, but showing a number of behind the line partisan attacks and intelligence attacks, as well as then date and location of where they are across Russia and Russian areas as well. Now, I wanted to speak about the RVC in a little bit more length here as well. And as we do know, this is not just some ragtag group. It is made up of some foreigners, some Russians, some Ukrainians. And one of my friends goes to me, this was a while back here, but speaking of false flags, I wonder why the Russian Volunteer Corps haven't been used more for clandestine operations against Russian assets worldwide, as their efforts in Russia are largely counterproductive and likely galvanizing of support in Russia for the war. Like those crosses we've seen into Belgorod were, and I agree with this, counterproductive and just turned a lot of people more against Ukraine in those areas too. Same as the creep allowing Western weapons for Ukrainian strikes in Russia. If you're trying to prove that you're purely defending yourself, you kind of need to not kill Russian civilians, which we did see in those crossings in those areas. Yes, a lot of fog of war. Yes, there was some blatant just bullshit go on. But Russians attacking Russian assets worldwide is not a whole other thing. The FSB, GRU are doing it in Europe, so it's fair play in my book. And I go, it's really interesting to take, but it's because the Volunteer Corps, they aren't Russians, they are Ukrainians and Westerners. Now, I do need to correct myself on here. He's saying, I should have said they're not solely just Russians as we are told. You know, originally these are told these are just either Russian prisoners who have come or people that have defected to Ukraine. That's it. It is definitely not that. We see from the GoPro footage, there's a lot of Poles, a lot of other Westerners, and there's a lot of Ukrainians just from the language in this as well. And I ask about GRU, FSB. These are Russian intelligence services, military intelligence, and intelligence as well in Europe. And we have a little bit more here. 2 fires, separate sites within a week at these properties with excellent safety procedures have been quietly attributed to Russian sources, most likely achieved through placing agents in the cleaning team who could plant devices while largely unsupervised. In my time working, corporate security contractors are always the issue. Never a week went by without cleaners swiping laptops or enabling access for criminal gangs. You only need the name, not the personnel. And the reason I've circled this is where I'm incorrect in this. It doesn't matter who is in these groups. It's the name, and it can be attributed to, oh, well, it's the Russian Volunteer Corps. It's the insurgency against Russia or within Europe, striking Russian facilities as well. And that's a very interesting take. It's just the name that you need. It doesn't matter who then makes that up. Seems the Russian agents came in, and this is further on some of these strikes, as tourists, got the cleaning team here somehow, not fucking hard, because this particular company sucked itself over cleaning contractor that hired refugees. So trying to sort of show they're doing the right thing. So the most economically hard up people in the country who are most susceptible to financial influence are given unsupervised access to vulnerable areas and easily stolen resold kit, and set about their arson activities before departing area immediately. It's not verified, but the most likely conclusion based on AusInt evidence. And I have to black out some of this as well here. So yeah, it is interesting to see why Russian Volunteer Corps hasn't been used more in other areas too. And it's correct of where I was incorrect is you just need the name of it. That, well, this is Russians attacking Russia. It doesn't matter where it is or who specifically is potentially in that makeup also. And speaking of then intelligence operations and this and that, I want to talk further about something that's just ignored. It shouldn't be, even if you'd have no interest in the war, but then you have an interest in the environment because it's the largest man-made disaster, I believe, ever. Of then Nord Stream pipelines. Now, this is from Politico, but it's published by German Welt, a sister publication of Politico. 2 years ago, several explosions in the Baltic Sea caused a worldwide uproar. A short time later, it was clear that 3 of the 4 branches of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, which were laid to supply gas from Russia to Germany, had been destroyed. But by whom? German investigators believe they have the answer. The main suspect is a Ukrainian diving instructor named Volodymyr Z. It's not the Volodymyr Z, it's a Volodymyr Z, who last lived near Warsaw. Investigators suspect him of carrying out the attack together with 5 other Ukrainians, but before he could be arrested, the suspect flew to his home country, being Ukraine. German investigators are now accusing Poland of not executing the European arrest and search warrants issued against Volodymyr Z by Germany Federal Court of Justice in June. Federal criminal police and federal public prosecutor's office are displeased. They're claiming that Poland was sabotaging the investigation. Another person familiar with the investigation called the episode an obstruction of justice. The Polish government obviously let him go in order to cover up its own involvement in attack on the pipelines. He's convinced the presidents of Poland and Ukraine, between, of course, Duda and Zelensky, were aware of the attack plans. Operations of such dimensions are inconceivable without the approval of political leaders of the countries involved. Now, speaking not of Duda, but of course of the Prime Minister Donald Tusk. He had this only last month on Twitter to the initiators and patrons of Nord Stream 1 and 2, so those who started the pipelines, put it in, and then who took the gas from it. The only thing you should do today about it is apologize and keep quiet. Of you were doing the wrong thing, taking that gas for cheap from Russia. Apologize and keep quiet. And he tweeted this on the time that this investigation came out last time we reported on this channel. Investigators say the 6-man diving crew that allegedly planted the explosives from the sailing yacht, the Andromeda, had been trained in Poland. Investigators also believe Warsaw may have provided logistical support for the underwater operation. Again, if you know anything about diving, if you're SDI or Paddy Quold, you know that this is not just someone out there with their open water ticket going under the bloody water. This is a professional hit. German investigators are also accusing Polish authorities of deliberately withholding video recordings from the marina. In Poland, authorities say they are outraged by the accusations coming from Germany. The allegation that Ukraine carried out this action with Polish knowledge is completely unfounded. He said accusations and insinuations are coming from a close circle of former pro-Russian officials who no longer hold positions of power. Now, in the EU, if you throw pro-Russia at someone in any capacity, especially if they're official, that is used to discredit that instantly, regardless of what they say. I hope that we are not dealing with an organised disinformation campaign in which people have allowed themselves to be used to blame Poland. Poland, he said, is investigating all leads, including the possibility that Russia was involved in the attack. And as we have gone across, we believe most likely that it was not Russia involved in it, as if you have Occam's razor of what is most likely in this, who has the most benefit from this, why would then Russia do this? It was a way for billions of dollars from Russia. And like I've said here, if it was Russia, the investigation would absolutely stop at nothing. Every country here would be absolutely interested in finding the answer, not these other countries that have shut down their investigations into this. What do the suspects themselves think? A high-ranking officer who lives in a major Ukrainian city and is alleged to have been involved in the pipeline attack said, "It is ridiculous to believe that we did it. But if Ukraine was behind the attack, Germany should stop the investigation. Because for Kyiv, it was a legitimate military target." Now, is this not a legitimate military target for Kyiv? I'm not the one who can say this, but attacks on energy facilities into Europe and how NATO, EU, and how that is seen, that is a big problem if it's coming from a country that is not within NATO and the EU. NATO and the EU hasn't been attacked, and it is an attack against their energy infrastructure and energy security as well. A lot of Germans are very, very pissed off at this, and I would urge on the side of it probably at that point strategically a big, big issue, and I believe that's why Germany is not letting this up. Donald Tusk, he said the quote, this tweet that we pulled up before, German investigators in the meantime have ruled out so-called false flag operations by the Russians. Again, it doesn't make sense why Russia would do this. There's billions of dollars in it for them. They say that they are certain that the former commander-in-chief, Valery Zhuzny, gave the order for the attack. German authorities in public have stayed quiet about the investigation. The federal government of Germany is not commenting and is also not commenting on reports that alleged detailed investigative results in the media. Meanwhile, it appears that Volodymyr Z, again, not Volodymyr Z, will ever face German authorities in person. Even under a European treaty, Ukraine is not required to extradite its nationals to other states, and other people suspected of the plot presumably gone into hiding. Now, what I will say about this is I think this would fall over if Ukraine enters the EU in the future. These extradition laws will probably change, and I think if Germany is not going to let this up, well, then we will see. Remember that Ursula von der Leyen, of course, the president of the EU, at the time said this: any deliberate disruption of active European energy infrastructure is unacceptable and will lead to the strongest possible response. Very interesting to see, too, that Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, when he said the reason why in the 10-point peace plan, Zelensky specifically says nuclear energy security and not energy security, is because if it pops up that this was a jeopardize of energy security at Nord Stream, like is being painted by Germany, that it could fall apart at that point too. That's why you got to listen to many people, even if you disagree wholeheartedly with some of what is said. So let's have a quick look on the maps too. We'll come up into then the north here. Now the labelling of the towns in here is shocking across these maps, so it is bloody hard to get any idea of where this is sitting. But let's have a look at Syriac. Now, he shows that out near Kotonovo, that Russia had some advancement out here, as well as in the east. Now, the best way to do this is we just line up where this road is running through here. If it pops up, See where the kink is, that it's in this area. He has said that Ukraine has had an advancement as well as just out into the north here. So there is still some movement in here, although significantly less than we have seen previously. And just in this area of which we spoke of just before, so in and around here, it is said that Russia has had some pushback as well by Syriac. Deep State NOEL reports show no changes in here. So let's move our way down the map a little bit. So let's come down New York, Toretsk front as well. Now we have New York number 1. Of course, we saw that push back by Azov into here. And now he's saying Russian army launched counterattack and managed to capture the northern part of New York and the southern part of Novolivka Street, blah, blah, blah. And the factory remains unclear. Of course, that was where the Ukrainian forces were hiding out in there and under fire. So then he said that this area in here, after being then cleared, has then come back under control. So there is a lot of back and forward in here. Let's have a look what he said. Possibly Ukrainian counterattack was aimed at lifting the siege on the Flonic plant and allowing besieged to withdraw. For the moment, there is no Russian confirmation of the siege of the plant, but there is a confirmation of the presence part of it. So I think there was a rescue operation to try and pull those guys out of that front. Now, one of the most interesting updates coming through, and I'm seeing a lot of pages report this, is down in Kherson. There are reports that Russian DRG elements have then crossed in here, captured this island. So let's, the island in here. There are reports the infiltration of Russian reconnaissance groups at DRGs in the island of Korabela, north of it. So this is interesting to see here. Potentially, could they ever try and cross back across the Dnipro? Well, I have no idea, but I do know any side of this that tries to cross open water like that with the amount of ISR drones and everything at the moment, it is going to be one hell of a feat if it's able to be done. So let's have a look. Kuzymivka, Bedestov, Pishani front in here. And that Syriac is just showing that just in this location in here, there's been a Russian advancement. Again, this shows the same on this map. So we can confirm there was an advancement there at some point. We move our way down to then Terny, Nevelsky front in here. So what it is showing, if you have Nevsky here, then Terny and the reservoir in here, that down this, I believe this is a train line down here, that Russia made some ground, and just around the positions in where my cursor is here, he's saying that there was some ground shift as well. We see this long and short paddock, so right up in this area at the moment is an unknown. We'll take it on notice and we'll report back once we get a better idea. Legends, if you can't tell, I feel absolutely shocking and my brain is just fog. I hope that you have a great day and hopefully I feel better tomorrow. Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.